My name is Kathy. I'm a 45-year-old who's become quite the health enthusiast, all thanks to starting to feel back pain when I wake up in the morning. I've really gotten into running and such. Now that I think about it, for the past few years, my wish has always been to stay healthy. Quite a change from my younger days when I wished to get along with the boy in the next class. How the subtle signs of aging sneak up on me. Today, I want to share a story from before I turned into a health nut. I would like you to listen to it. Let's wind back the clock by 10 years. I was 35 then, and in my own words, I was an adorable, head-turning, super cute, pretty girl, or so I wish I could say. But sorry, that's just a fantasy. It was full of wishes. The real story is about when I quit my job and was diligently helping with house duties. Contrasting my drab life, my older brother, Steve, brought home a dazzling woman after announcing he was planning to get married. And by dazzling, I mean really glittery. She was wearing heavy makeup. Her lips shone with gloss. I worried if she might attract flies. Her hair was softly curled, giving her a relaxed vibe, and her nails were intricately designed, clearly done at a salon. I thought, wow, she's a pro. Not just some ordinary one. She brought a nightclub vibe right into our house. Even my parents seemed a bit confused. And I was right. Steve and this woman, Rachel, met at a nightclub. She was working there, and Steve bragged like it was some heroic tale that he had wooed her. But I doubt it was his charm alone. Steve looks every bit the rich guy. How? He's decked out in brand name stuff from head to toe, so much so that it's almost tacky. Glasses, suit, tie pin, belt, shoes. All designer brands. If a brand name laden guy like that came at me, I'd probably play coy too. I can imagine the Benjamin Franklins and Amex cards he must flaunt. No wonder Rachel showed him a smile just for him. It seemed unlikely for someone as plain and kind as Steve to land such a girlfriend. But, hold on, aren't I being too judgmental about Steve and Rachel? I think so, but it's also true that Rachel's flashy look and skimpy skirt made it hard to shake off that impression. Plus, I just found out she was only 20. I was 35. A younger sister-in-law, huh? I was confused about how to act towards Rachel. My mother looked pale, wondering about the age difference, while my father seemed resigned. Despite our confusion, Rachel cheerfully said she was looking forward to marrying Steve. The meeting was more of a marriage announcement than a conversation, leaving us all dumbstruck. The next day, Steve said he knew we must have been uncomfortable and proposed a dinner for us to relax and get to know Rachel better. I had to admit, we had judged her based on her looks and mannerisms without really talking to her. Maybe she was a good person if I talked to her. I didn't really talk to her in the first meeting. I wasn't thrilled, but for Steve's sake, I decided to give it a chance. My parents agreed, and the dinner was set for the following weekend. Surprisingly, the dinner went smoothly. Rachel, being in the hospitality industry, she knew how to engage even us, a somewhat plain family. We could follow the conversation easily since she included stories about Steve. From her looking, she seemed like a different world from the one we live in, but I had to admit my initial judgment was wrong. But then, as I was returning from the restroom, I overheard Rachel on her phone, badmouthing our family. They're all plain. Especially the mother, whose face is covered in wrinkles and spots, which is really impossible. I don't want to grow old like that. I thought they were rich, but it was normal. The father is also a bit of an old man, so I'm not sure if I'll be able to handle it. I'm thinking of making up an affair and getting a quick divorce. The sister is older and doesn't have a boyfriend. I mean, she's so fat and employed that it's funny. I need to run away before she asks me to take care of her in the future. I was stunned. Was I hearing things? But no, there she was, cheerfully chatting away about bad things about my family. I was stuck. What should I do? Should I say, "What are you saying, whatever you want?" Or should I keep quiet? By the time I decided, she was back at the table. I reluctantly followed, not wanting to spoil the evening. The dinner ended without incident, but my family's view of Rachel skyrocketed, unaware of her true colors. Steve continued to hold dinners until the wedding, seemingly eager to integrate Rachel fully into our family. Our parents even started looking forward to these dinners, and Rachel's standing with us improved dramatically. I didn't record Rachel's phone conversation. I didn't even hear the other person's voice. And in front of my family, Rachel seems like such a nice girl. If I accuse her and she claims it's a misunderstanding or that I misheard, I might not be believed. Even now, I sometimes wonder if I really did mishear. But, darn it. Steve is my dear brother after all. What am I supposed to do? These thoughts have been troubling me for days. Then, one day, Steve said, "Rachel wants to have a meal with you, just the two of you. Go to this place. Don't worry, I'll cover the bill," while pointing to a map of a restaurant. It was a pretty upscale Italian restaurant. Free food is nice and all, but why me specifically? It's kinda scary. But, being a jobless person with nothing better to do, I had no reason to refuse. So, off I went to the Italian restaurant. "Kathy! Thank you for coming." Rachel greeted me with such enthusiasm when she saw me that, honestly, I didn't feel too bad. She really knows how to make people happy. I even started to doubt whether I had misheard that phone call. But as the meal progressed, the atmosphere started to feel a bit tense. "Kathy, it was a while ago, but you heard my phone conversation, didn't you?" "Yes." "That first dinner we had. Right after I returned to the table, you came back too. But just behind you, a woman who had gone to the restroom came out. There's only one stall in that restroom. You weren't in there together, right?" Rachel chuckled. Wow, she's been keeping a close watch. True, I do remember a woman entering the restroom while I was overhearing Rachel's call. But I was so panicked by what Rachel was saying that I don't remember much else. I couldn't think of anything to say, so I just took a bite of my rice gratin. "Aren't you putting food before conversation? You'll only get fatter." Realizing I was being provoked, I thought, this is a taunt, all right. Let's not hide it anymore, but please don't spill our conversation to Steve or your parents, okay? Rachel said, laughing loudly. As an aside, my weight gain started when I worked in a toxic environment, leading to stress eating. I had a period of not eating at all, becoming skinny, but then I started overeating as a stress reliever and gained weight. Sure, I'm overweight, but now I'm focusing on my mental health, thinking, so what if I'm fat? I was just a bit over the standard weight. Living stress-free was what's important to me. I was okay with how I am, and I didn't see why Rachel should have a say. Especially since I was not causing her any trouble. You know, to be honest, I find you, and even your parents, kind of embarrassing. You get it, right? No way, how could I agree with being called embarrassing? Am I living in La La Land? I can't tell your parents not to come to the wedding, but Kathy, you don't have to force yourself. It must be hard to move around being overweight, right? I'll send you a wedding invitation just for formality, but please make an excuse and don't attend. Anyway, we'll accept your gift. Wow, does she think a jobless person like me has some big plans to miss my brother's wedding? And after coming all this way to this restaurant, she's saying moving is hard for me? No way. I wanted to punch her right in the face, but kept my cool and said, "Fine, I won't come, as you wish. But don't come crying to me later." After that, I left the restaurant. When I got home and told my parents, "I'm not going to Steve's wedding," Mom panicked. "What happened all of a sudden? Why would you say that?" My father also looked puzzled. "What's going on?" Rachel told me. She'll accept a gift but doesn't want me at the wedding. Says I'm too embarrassed because I'm fat. Well, I paraphrased a bit, but it's essentially what she said. Really? Rachel said that? Their faces showed disbelief and confusion, like they couldn't believe it but also couldn't imagine I'd lie. I understand how you feel. I felt the same way until now. But listen to this. I placed a small recorder on the table. Right, I brought the recorder just in case, since it was going to be just Rachel and me at the restaurant. I really wanted some concrete evidence this time. So, when she asked if I had been eavesdropping on her phone call, I turned it on. Listening to the recording, my parents alternated between going pale and getting red with anger. After they heard everything, my father slammed his fist on the table and yelled, "She's making a mockery of our family." I didn't want to add fuel to the fire, but I had to share the necessary information. I told them that I'd been wary of Rachel from the beginning because she had said similar things at the first dinner. My mother buried her head in her hands, lamenting, what a troublesome daughter-in-law she's turned out to be. "No, she's not yet, Mom. Steve hasn't registered the marriage." My parents looked shocked at my words. "What do we do about the wedding then? If we cancel now, won't Steve be stuck with the cancellation fees?" My father asked, worried. "Don't worry, I have a plan. Steve won't lose a penny." I said this confidently. We split up and started calling Steve's relatives and friends who were invited to the wedding. We needed to tell them to cancel their attendance. To make sure everyone understood the situation, I set up the recording to be accessible online. Of course, I explained what happened verbally, but for those who found it hard to believe, they could listen to Rachel's words themselves. It was a case of hearing is believing. While calling, we apologized for having been too lenient in choosing a daughter-in-law and for dragging everyone into this mess, sincerely explaining why we wanted them to not attend. I won't lie, I was nervous. It felt like exposing our family's embarrassment, and I feared that no one would agree to such an outrageous request, possibly severing ties with relatives. But when we pleaded, "We want to help our dear son, it's selfish but please cooperate," surprisingly, everyone readily agreed. They even reprimanded us, "You can't let him marry someone like that." It makes sense. As it turned out, our relatives and Steve's childhood friends we could reach all decided to skip the wedding. We also informed the venue about the situation, explaining that everyone on Steve's side, except for work acquaintances we couldn't contact, would not be attending. Although it was a huge inconvenience, they understood, saying, "It's a major life event, after all." I think it was more the wedding planner's kindness than the venue's official stance. We probably caused them a lot of trouble behind the scenes, but I'll never forget their understanding. Next was Steve. We waited until 3 weeks before the wedding, at the last minute, to tell him that everyone was bailing. After he learned everything, he just stood there in shock and finally said, "I understand." If Steve had insisted on going through with the wedding regardless, our plan would have failed. But I trusted my sisterly intuition that it would be all right. Then, on the night before the wedding, a storm hit our house. Rachel stormed in with her parents, fuming, "What is the meaning of this?" Steve was right behind them. "Oh, Rachel, what's wrong?" My mother asked nonchalantly. "What's wrong? Starting this week, the cancellations for the wedding have been trickling in. It was too strange, so when I pressed Steve, even your own family said they're not coming. What's happening on our big day?" That was expected. We had asked everyone, including the venue, to cancel early, but to notify Rachel and Steve at the last minute. Rachel had reached out to me unnecessarily, thinking she could keep it under wraps until the wedding. Her impulsive nature and lack of composure made her reveal her true colors. "Rachel said our family was embarrassed, so she didn't want your parents at the wedding. We just told everyone the truth and decided as a family not to attend." "Don't lie! Ruining such an important day with lies. The guest list is now less than half. How are you going to make this right?" Rachel's parents, in a near frenzy, hugged her, saying, "Poor Rachel. What are you planning with all this? Do you want to call off the engagement?" Rachel's mother glared at us sharply. But it wasn't for us to answer. Steve, you're not just going to stand there the whole time, are you? I nudged my brother, who looked unsure of what to do next. Oh! What do you want, Steve? It's fine if we don't attend, but the decision is yours. Do you still want to get married? My father started to object, but I stopped him. It was important for Steve to make his own decision without regret. He had once vowed to marry this woman. Even if we tell him she's awful, it's hard to believe instantly. But Steve isn't a man without judgment. I trusted him. I did love Rachel, and I really wanted to marry her. See? Steve is saying this, so you all need to understand the situation. Rachel, mistaking Steve's words as support, slipped up and addressed us informally. Steve noticed this change and smiled sadly. I really have no eye for women. I hardly dated and got too excited about marrying a beautiful woman. You've always aimed too high despite a lifelong record of not being popular, Steve. Look at the mirror of reality. Right. Our family has a legacy of not being popular, tracing back to our great-grandfather. Embrace the plainness in your life. Hey, I wasn't unpopular, you know. Mom, lying is bad. We all teased Steve, who finally burst out laughing. Well, it was nice to dream for a while. I've decided, I'm calling off the wedding. At that moment, our parents' faces lit up, and I high-fived them. What are you doing? Making decisions on your own, and all of you yammering about it. Rachel burst out. Exactly. The wedding is tomorrow. Please take this seriously. What's this about the family being embarrassing? Rachel's mother finally asked. I internally cheered. I was about to bring it up myself, but it's more impactful if they ask out of curiosity. Forcing them to listen would just be ignored. Glad you asked, I said and played the recording. Rachel's parents' faces gradually turned pale, but Rachel herself defiantly said, so what, it's just a recording. I've heard Rachel say various things about our family before. That's why she called only me to meet that day, and the recording itself is the best evidence that she wanted to talk to me. Rachel claimed it was all made up, but her parents hung their heads in shame. I'm sorry. Our daughter is entirely at fault. Rachel's father said first. We let her grow up too freely, causing trouble for you. I'm sorry. He apologized deeply, causing a bewildered Rachel to say, Wait, Dad. Why are you apologizing? Apologize right now. Rachel's mother raised her voice. I can't believe she turned out to be such a rude daughter. We believed in you and came here, only to be embarrassed like this. Don't make us apologize. What? Even Mom's against me now. That moment. Then, with tears in his eyes, Rachel's father slapped her cheek. Enough. Demanding large sums of money from someone's sister, mocking the family of the man you were going to marry. When did you become so disgraceful? Don't forget, you almost ruined Steve's life. Behind Rachel's father, who was laying down some harsh truths, Steve looked like he wanted to say, my life won't be ruined by this. Don't make a mess on your own. Seeing Steve's laid-back reaction, I almost laughed. It felt like our family's trait was showing through. Steve, Kathy, and everyone. I'm truly sorry for everything that's happened. Perhaps feeling that wasn't enough, Rachel's father apologized again and again. We had no idea Rachel was being so disrespectful. Not knowing makes it even more shameful. Just apologizing isn't enough to atone for the embarrassment and trouble we've caused. To be honest, I didn't feel embarrassed, but Rachel's father's sentiment was painfully clear. Let's cancel the wedding. What? But the wedding is tomorrow. Won't we have to pay the full cancellation fee? So what? We should be thankful it can be resolved with money. You've done something that warrants being scolded here and now. You should be grateful to Steve and his family for not doing so. Rachel's father yelled, red-eyed with anger, while her mother repeatedly apologized to us.
Wait, Dad, I can't pay that.
We will pay. You'll take however many years necessary to repay us. And from now on, we're cutting ties with you.
A joke, right?
Rachel, desperately pulling on her father's clothes, pleaded, Hey. Why am I being thrown out? Dad, do something, Mom too. You don't understand why you're being cast out, and that's why it's happening. If you understood, none of this would have happened. Rachel's mother said, looking at her with contempt. No way. Rachel collapsed, overwhelmed by the situation. I couldn't help but feel a bit smug at this unexpected turn of events. Serves her right. Even if I'm plain and was once overweight, I have my own strengths. Underestimating me comes with a price. Steve and everyone. Don't worry about the cancellation. We'll cover all the expenses incurred so far. I almost smiled, relieved at how smoothly things were going, but maintained a solemn face, thanking them. My parents, struggling to contain their joy, managed to keep their expressions ambiguous. Steve, out of Rachel's sight, silently cheered with a small victory gesture. I thought to myself, calm down a bit, he didn't do much. Within a month of the cancelled wedding, Rachel's parents brought us a gift, the cancellation fee, and an additional $60,000 as compensation. They had insisted on settling with us to avoid court and legal fees. We had trouble deciding on a fair amount, but eventually suggested an average sum. However, Rachel's father paid us the requested amount plus an additional $30,000. Honestly, I wasn't sure if we'd have received this much even if we went to court. Life isn't always like a story. Sometimes, you have to accept less than ideal outcomes. We're grateful for Rachel's parents' sincerity. As for Rachel, her parents took all her savings to cover the repayment and kicked her out with nothing. She hopped between friends' houses and sometimes resorted to sleeping in stations, almost homeless. Her parents accepted this as her just desserts, a tough love approach to teaching their once spoiled daughter a lesson. I think he pushed the lion cub down the valley with extraordinary determination. Once a month, she shows up to make payments, so we know she's alive, her parents said with a complex smile. Fast forward 10 years. Steve, determined to get married, actively engaged in matchmaking and married a woman who worked in a restaurant and was an excellent cook. Being a food enthusiast, Steve was literally won over by her cooking. Now married, they rarely eat out, with Steve eagerly returning home for his wife's cooking. As for me, I had enough of corporate life and became a freelance translator. My previous job, dealing with foreigners, gave me a good language foundation. Realizing the demand for freelance translators, I studied hard and achieved my goal. Now, I earn significantly more than I did as an employee, working in a much more relaxed environment. Focusing on my studies curbed my overeating, and I returned to my pre-employment weight. No longer overweight or underweight, I'm just average, which feels great. Well, I don't know if I'm proud of the average. At least for me, I had a hard time becoming an average, so I'm really happy to be back to normal. And thanks to my work, if I may say so myself, I even married a handsome man. Introducing him to my family post-Rachel incident, they joked, "You're being fooled and no way a guy like him falls for your plain jeans." My husband said he loved my plain features. Just to be clear, my husband has no ill intentions at all. He's seriously praising me. He meant it as a compliment, so I take it positively. Our daughter is now 4. Every day is very lively and happy. The only issue is her bedtime storybook is about history. Surprisingly, she loves it and falls asleep peacefully to it every night.